Good morning once again. My name is Wanjiru Gekonyo with the Institute for Social Accountability, and happy to be with you this morning. Thank you for your patience. We still have a few colleagues we are waiting who will be joining us, but we can make the assumption that they've read the report and will be able to join us in due course for the deliberations. So thank you for joining us this morning. We are here today to validate and discuss the findings of a study we undertook last year with the support of the NIDA. And we were very excited about this study because it sought to explore the underpinnings and foundations of social accountability programs work in the country. And it's an interesting study in that in the discussions we had with Joseph Joguna, the project manager, governance project manager of the NIDA, we were asking the question about our programs on one hand and the political culture on the other. And this political will question or non-implementation challenge that has, remained quite resistant between the work we do and the results we see. So we undertook the study during the height of the COVID period. So all the interviews were conducted by telephone. And of course, at that point, we were still learning that it's possible to work remotely. Now we are struggling to get back into the office and get back into the direct interaction that's necessary for our work. And what we'll present today is a very top-line view of that study. We hope you received the study in good time, have been able to look at it, so that the recommendations out of that, the findings and recommendations will form the basis of this conversation. The objective of this engagement, this brief discussion that we'll have this morning from our point of view is to help inform our next steps. We undertook a study. Traditionally, of course, you want to undertake a study and validate the study. For very many reasons, we were not able to do that. So here we are kind of validating the study. So you'll be, giving us your feedback. You may disagree with the findings entirely, and we want to hear that. Or you may resonate with the findings. As well as the feedback into the study, there's what we intend to do with the study, which is with support from the NIDA once again through the Uraia Trust. We are undertaking another formative study looking at how can we redesign the foundation of social accountability programs. It's our hope that this piece of work will inform other programs. And the focus we have is what are, our big question is what are the philosophical underpinnings that social accountability programs need to address to build the ownership, to build the sustainability and deal with the issue of political will. So it's quite ambitious in its outlook, and we are very grateful. I, on behalf of TISA, I'm particularly grateful for the partners who have journeyed with us. I can see many of the colleagues who are with us either as key informants to the study or in the focus group discussion. And we had very enriching and vibrant conversations and findings, and we've sought to be very diligent in drawing those out and in analyzing them and in the conclusions we made. So we hope we have been true to the feedback you gave us. And we came up with certain conclusions and proposals that are contained in the report, and we want to hear back from you. So today, so we are grateful to you for your time then. We are grateful to you for your time now. Of course, we are very grateful for the support of Joseph Joguna in particular, from Danida, in really pushing us to keep thinking strategically. And whenever we got or get tempted to go back to operational issues, you know, he's a very big champion in terms of keeping us focused on, let's ask the why. Let's ask the why question. We are quite good at the what. We are quite good at the how. But the why question we don't ask often enough, because we're always in a race, catching up with elections, catching up with constitution implementation, catching up with citizens. So today we are trying to ask questions around the why, and we are grateful that you joined us in this conversation, and we look forward to hearing from you. And like I said, the outputs from this in very concrete terms will help us hopefully establish a working group that can continue to journey with us as we undertake what we anticipate will be the next level of studies, and these will be quite practical studies on some of the thematic areas that would inform a philosophical underpinning of social accountability. And so we are keen to identify interests, views, to set up this working group, identify the areas that could do with more thinking to inform what would, you know, we are using the term module, but possibly it's not a module, maybe just a working document, a thinking document around, you know, more transformative social accountability. We also hope to use the findings for elections agenda setting. So we are trying to do this work, and hopefully by some point in February, March, have outputs that can allow us to have discussions with political leaders to say, you know, this is an agenda. Are you going to take this agenda and, you know, make that an elections agenda issue? Now, we know it's a bit late in the game, but we also know in the political arena, a good idea will always have currency. So we intend to put our best minds and efforts towards framing that conversation. So with that, I'd like to welcome you to this forum and kindly invite Joseph Kimani, who has been very instrumental in supporting this work, so that he can officially open the forum for us. Joseph, please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manjiro, and good morning to everyone else on this call, and thanks for availing time for this very important validation process. So there's no doubt, I mean, all of us who are in this call are convinced about the importance of social accountability. I am sure that all of us view social accountability as perhaps the most powerful evidence of citizen engagement in development, and also a celebration of citizen agency. And that's why we as Denmark are very, very keen to keep on contributing towards this very, very important effort, strengthening social accountability. We have seen it in practice. Our partnership with organizations such as TISA and Uraia and partners, both at national level and county level, convince us of the importance of social accountability. And we also know that when social accountability is done well, it provides a veritable and credible opportunity for all development actors to work together in a collaborative effort. Because social accountability is not necessarily an antagonistic effort. Of course, when you start off, there's bound to be some turbulence, some resistance from especially the duty bearers. But with time, social accountability provides a real possibility for actors in development to collaborate and ensure that you have good development outcomes. So we are very pleased to count TISA as one of our very, very important partners, and very, very proud to be associated with this study. We have, of course, participated in the thinking around it and in all the consultations, and we are very, very happy with the product that is there. And this validation can only improve upon that. Looking at the 6 recommendations, very, very powerful recommendations that are contained in this report, I would be very, very keen to hear from you about what you think about those recommendations. We believe that they are practical, we believe that they are progressive, and that they will add to this body of knowledge on social accountability. So I want to congratulate TISA through you and Jiro, your great team, for the very, very good work that you've done. And we definitely look forward to continuously engaging you as TISA and the other stakeholders as we give strength to this very, very, very important citizen agency approach of social accountability. So thank you very much and welcome everybody. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for those kind words and re-emphasizing the importance and role of social accountability in governance and democratization in our country, in building citizen agency. Indeed, that is very inspiring. I'd like to welcome Eric Kinaga. Eric has recently joined TISA. We are very excited to have him as a member of our team. He's come in as the programs manager, and in that capacity has also taken up lead of this particular study. So Eric will take us through the study findings, and karibu sana, Eric.
Right, thanks. Thank you, Shiro and Joseph, for setting our context, and I'm glad to see all of us on the call. Thank you once again for creating time for this. I'll proceed to share the presentation, an overview of the presentation. And I think just to mention before I proceed that I have shared on the chat the larger report which we had attached to our invitation, which we made for this particular workshop. So for anyone who might want to or haven't had time to look at it, you can download it from this chat and be able to interact or appraise yourself on it as we move along, or rather after this session. But allow me to quickly take us through the overview of the session of this presentation. So I think as has been pointed out, the idea is to refocus or reimagine or rethink social accountability as we know it and as we practice it. And these are considerations for development practitioners, for researchers, for scholars who have devoted themselves to the furtherance of social accountability as an approach to promoting good governance. So the study that was alluded to had 2 main objectives that it sought to achieve. The first one was to assess the extent to which social accountability programs are empowering citizens. As we know, it's a critical aspect of building a greater sense of citizenship, and so this formed one of the main objectives. The second objective around this was to promote learning, learning acceptance of social accountability practice, and also to improve future programming on the same. So in terms of the specific objectives for the study, they included 4 of these, which include assessing the contribution of social programming in building the culture and practice of social accountability under the devolved government in Kenya. The second objective was to review lessons that emerge from social accountability practice for future programming considerations. Third was appraising the opportunities and imperatives which are key in building sustainable models of social accountability. And thirdly, making recommendations for programming effectiveness. The methodology that was used, and I think Wanjiro had alluded to this, was that the study mainly focused, of course, mainly focused on the period between 2013 to 2019 of social accountability programs undertaken during this period. And it kicked off in April. And key informant interviews that were reached in our 82 out of a target of about 100, with 1 focus group discussion being held that had about 7 respondents. So the respondents were also, came in from diverse actors. We had national government, county government, media-based civil society organizations, academia and research. We had development partners, intergovernmental organizations, and also representatives from the private sector. So on to the findings. I think there are a couple of findings, and one of them is around the way social accountability programs are designed. And one of the key findings that came out is that the majority of development and academic partners involved their stakeholders at the design stage, while only about 50% of civil society organizations do so. Partnerships were also identified as a key engagement strategy by all actors who were engaged in the study, and it was identified as useful in creating synergies and avoiding duplication of roles. Then almost all respondents indicated that they had been deliberate in targeting marginalized groups such as stakeholders or benefit, or either as, so identifying marginalized groups either as stakeholders or as beneficiaries in their own programs. And of note here is to mention that of note is the fact that this is a requirement, especially on the part of government, to ensure inclusion. So some of the approaches that that came out quite strongly from the interactions we had with the respondents is that capacity building, civic education, and community forums were the most popular approaches regarded by civil society and development actors. Other approaches that featured quite prominently included social audits, budget monitoring, advocacy, legislative monitoring, the use of TOTs, investigative journalism, and donor steering committees as key approaches around social accountability. Then there were challenges faced by non-state actors. From the broad spectrum that we mentioned, and this included the delays and failure by government to respond to the interventions that emerged from social accountability interventions. We had the issue around lack of access to information that came out as a key impediment to social accountability efforts. Challenges around citizen engagement also included the low capacity to organize, or high poverty and literacy ratios, literacy levels, technology challenges, and limited resources. And I think these features later we're going to see one of the other issues one of the other overarching issues that came out of the study around the issue of livelihood. I think also to note is that short-term social accountability programs was cited as a major challenge, as a key challenge in achieving measurable impact by civil society organizations. On the supply side and the side of government, some of the gaps included the lack of allocation of resources for public participation. We also had the fact that national government had, and as well as county government, had not set up structures for civic education despite public participation constitutional provision. So there seemed to also have inadequate measures that had been taken to, in one way, reconcile county and national level regional interest. And featuring also in there prominently was the issue around the lack of political will. In terms of the achievements, so the achievements around social accountability approaches over the period that is 2013 to 2019, one of the things that came out is that social accountability had helped to expand public participation in the counties. So we had these approaches and interventions helping contribute to improvement in service delivery. The other aspect around capacity building of community and county and community-based organizations, and the strengthening of county-level oversight. In this case, the county assemblies. Then social accountability was also regarded, also seen to be applied towards the improvement of livelihoods and the inclusion of marginalized groups in governance processes. One of the other achievements that featured also prominently is the use of online platforms, that is portals and websites, which were integral in sharing and collecting information from citizens. And some of these platforms included Twitter and Facebook, which enabled and aggregated public dialogue around local issues and helped deepen the democratization process. Some of the emerging lessons from the study included the fact the aspect on technology as a cost-effective way of reaching a wider number of citizens and social accountability actors. helping to keep conversations going beyond the physical public participation meetings, which can only happen for a particular period of time. The other lesson that emerges is the need to increase access to open data and open source tools for visualization of this kind of data, particularly for media-based civil society organizations, for use in some of the areas that we work in. I think the need for data visualization and illustration came out quite prominently around some of the target groups that we are engaged in our work. So moving on to the reflections that emerged from the focus group discussion, I think one that came out featured quite prominently is the issue around the linkage between social accountability and livelihoods. So the need and the urgency, if I would say it, of linking social accountability to livelihood issues. How do we incentivize public participation amongst the citizenry and help create a connection between public participation and citizens putting food on their table? Then the other bit around that also came out quite prominently in the FGD is the fact that social accountability appears to have been projectized, thereby increasing cost and undermining citizen agency. This is also, I think, the whole approach around doing it as more of like a checklist, but not really speaking to the reality, or rather the objective to which it is intended, but rather done as more of a conventional, traditional way of doing our projects, and therefore not achieving the results that are intended. The other issue around that is the enhancement of sustainable social accountability by infusing skills to existing citizen groups and community structures. So this speaks around largely the issue on livelihoods. There was also the aspect that came out around conditional grants and the multiplicity of specialized funds and decision points, which creates challenges in championing accountability. So the issue around, and particularly around the issue of funding with, the development partners and the extent to which resources can be deployed to address objectives beyond which were envisioned, but which are critical to the overall furtherance of social accountability. I think the other point that speaks to the issue around strengthening evidence-based accountability, and this basically is around investigating the incentives for youth engagement in social accountability and enhancing citizen budget monitoring. So the youth were identified or came out quite prominently in the study as a key population segment that needs to be engaged, and also the fact that they are deeply interested in participating and in engaging in social accountability, but yet the reality is that they are not, and they're not, and those who are engaging are not engaging to the extent which that to the extent that it would be expected of them, or to the extent that we would expect of them to engage at county levels and even at national level. And so, how do we incentivize youth engagement to help augment the accountability processes that are happening at our grassroots levels? The other issue that also came out is aspects of political culture. The need to innovate around self-organizing and champion for allocation of resources for public participation to enable greater engagement. And I think one of the specific issues that emerged from this is the aspect on internalized oppression. And so you have a political culture that is not open to the issue around empowerment or self-organizing, and so you have a critical mass of right holders on the demand side who have acquiesced around the status quo and been comfortable on certain rudimental levels of engagement or public participation or social accountability interventions. And so the need to incentivize and help reorganize these active citizens into a critical mass who are able to actively push duty bearers towards the desired action would be key for us moving forward. The other bit related to social accountability and oversight. So there appeared to be a skewed focus towards county executive, and so a lot of the social accountability interventions appeared to mostly focus on the executive arm of government, and very few or very minimal interaction seemed or appeared to be happening with the oversight arm of government, which is in this case county assemblies as well as parliament. And so of note is the fact that these two critical offices help in check or provide oversight on the executive, and so information or evidence that emerges from social accountability then would be key to help buttress or bolster the efforts around oversight, and so would be key for us or for actors to very deliberately engage with county assemblies and even parliament at the national level as we continue to organize and program around social accountability interventions. So onto the recommendations. A couple of recommendations came out of the study. The first one relates to citizen engagement, and the finding around this was that for effective social accountability, there need to be a foundational philosophy that guides how social accountability is done, and this has continued to come out strongly. A couple of counties are now beginning to, a couple of counties who have for the last couple of years been, great champions of social accountability are beginning to ask, how do we sustain this practice? How do we embed a philosophy that can outlive a current governor's term of office and will not be affected by any transitions that would happen at county level? How do we root the interventions around social justice, around social accountability to a social justice approach, citizen empowerment that creates a basis for social transformation? So the resulting social transformation would lead then to irreversible changes in attitude, actions, emotions, and the behaviors among individuals towards achieving social change. The second recommendation that came out quite prominently is the lack of capacity. And so there's need for a proactive social accountability model that reinforces and builds capacity of civil society actors by making tools, skills, and approaches accessible and widely available, and perhaps, if I may add, more domesticated to the context within which we work. So this can be realized through collation, compiling, and developing and simplifying training approaches and manuals to create a simplified and comprehensive training manual and delivery program. The other issue that featured prominently is that as a country we have a culture of non-enforcement. There's a challenge around the lack of redress, especially on the side of duty bearers, on some of the issues that come out of these social accountability interventions and the evidence that social accountability builds. And this is evidence from our agency and our interaction even with oversight reports that come from the Office of the Control of Budget, and this is just on PFM, and I think one of the challenges around that area of work is that there hasn't been a lot of as much appetite from actors as expected around the issues that are emerging on how public resources are managed. And I think the same appears to be the case for social accountability. The need to be able to take action on some of the things that emerge from the social accountability interventions that we undertake as various actors. So there's a couple of recommendations around these, two of them. One of them is the need for a national leadership campaign that refocuses social accountability programs to push for leadership, accountability and enforcement, with a long-term strategy broken into short frames of both the immediate, short and medium term. So basically, this recommendation relates to the need to have a very deliberate and long-term kind of organizing around social accountability, with very specific spikes along the way that will inform what the medium, short, and long-term achievements or milestones will be. And I think possibly, I think for now it could be the elections, but even post-election or issues around electoral accountability, and in a few years it could be something different depending on what what the national psyche is. At present, the focus should be, I think this is a recommendation that came most strongly from some of our scholars, is that at present the focus on social accountability should be on the proposed constitutional amendment. I think at the time it was the BBI process. Then of course, again, the 2022 elections and the scenarios for post 2022 and what and the effects that they might have on social accountability interventions moving forward. Other recommendations included the issue on operational gaps and lack of political will, and this I think that the key recommendation around this was the need to formulate a program that drives for effective implementation of decentralization, public participation, and transparency as a basis for social accountability. The other bit is around the sectoral workings. So the need to capitalize on the COVID-19 pandemic to entrench the human rights-based approach in key target areas. Of course, looking at our diverse portfolios and capacities and histories of past work around the same. Sixth is strengthening social accountability programming, to enable improved transparency, accountability, and coordination of funding for social accountability programs. I think that seventh here is adopting a civil society development strategy, which is underpinned by capacity building on entrepreneurial leadership and institutional development skills for civil society leaders, so that we're able to progressively and deliberately build the capacity of this critical sector to be able to provide the needed oversight and accountability of the demand, of the supply side of governance. Yeah, so I think a number of questions arose from the study, some of which we've looked at, and some of which I have touched on. And I think by if you've taken time to go through the study, or if you take time to go through the study in a detailed way, I think these are some of the main issues that are going to emerge from the study. And these are the questions that we'd like to, among other reactions, of course, would be very glad to hear your thoughts on the study and your reflections on the same. But even as we open up the plenary, I think the four main questions we'd like to throw out to us is that emerged, some of the arguments that emerged from the study. One is that the social accountability programs largely take a utilitarian and incremental approach. I think this is an approach that has largely been pushed by the World Bank and I think largely widely accepted across the world, but as opposed to a conflict or transformational approach, which renders social accountability ineffective in creating social change. I think the second argument that the study makes and that requires our thinking is that social accountability programs do not adequately address the causes of citizen apathy, the systemic underlying root issues around on citizen apathy, and particularly the dysfunctional political culture and the relationship between voters and political leaders, thus undermining their effectiveness and ownership by the very people that we hope will own these interventions. Thirdly is that social accountability is preoccupied with tools and processes which are disempowering to civil society and community-based organization and implementers. and it takes time away from the much needed power relationship and influencing and the needed political engagement to adduce the outcomes of or rather the changes and the actions I would want to see in that sense. Lastly is the need for more effective collaboration between funding partners and civil society actors to enhance the impact of social accountability program. I think this had been touched on, including the funding periods, short-term funding periods for social accountability interventions, as opposed to long-term processes or designings that would help achieve more structural changes and be able to see and monitor the changes that are happening across the implementation period with the actors that we're working on in our various social accountability interventions. I'd like to stop at that. I think that brings an end. That brings the end to this study. I'd like to open up for the plenary and invite Wanjiru to help us moderate that. So I think I'll leave this screen for us as we continue to reflect, and we look forward to getting your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric. And I think at that point, I won't add on. Just I'd like to open up the floor, and like Eric has said, for your reactions and your inputs and feedback. So we are going to keep this slide open, but the presentation is up. So should you need us to scroll back, we are open. This is your time to give us the feedback that to give us your reactions. And you can do so by raising your hand. I'll try and, we are quite a few of us. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to see the hands as they come up. But the floor is open and we invite you to be heard. And if I don't see any hands, I might call out some of our partners who I know were with us in the FGD. And maybe I'll be forced to take that route. And then I'll go alphabetically. And I'll ask Abraham Rugo. Dr. Rugo, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for journeying with us. And I'd be very keen to hear from you. And then after that, I'll also invite Con. Con, again, you were with us during the FGD. I don't know whether we've done justice to the feedback you gave us. It was a year ago, and possibly your thinking has moved on. So I'd like to invite Abraham to kick us off, and then Con to kindly take the floor after that. So Abraham. I don't know if Abraham is with us. I can see Joanne has raised her hand. Okay, Joanne, please take the floor. Con, you can prepare yourself. I hope we'll hear from you. Thank you, Joanne. Please take the floor. And as you do so, please introduce yourself, the institution you're with, and proceed. Thank you. Hello. Might there be a problem in our communication? Joanne?
Okay, good morning.
Endelea.
My name is Joanne Otengo from Haki Organization, Mombasa. Oh, thank you, Lisa, for this report. And I must commend you for the good work. It's the opportunity for us who work on social accountability programs. It is true that most social accountability reports are more projected An example is funding a social accountability program for 1 or 2 years. That might give us recommendations, findings, but is there room to go back and evaluate? Even when we meet the county executives, and it is true, most of the social accountability programs are more projected to the executives. Thank you for just airing that we need to target the assembly. I have seen situations where all the queries are diverted to the executives. Or just within this week, I had a meeting with the Kwale County chief finance officers, director communications, and Madi and all that. And one question they asked me is that why don't you talk to the assembly? They're the ones who are representatives of their communities. There's a tendency of just meeting the executives. So this is something we working on social accountability and the practitioners on social accountability. We do it, but let's strengthen targeting the right stakeholders in social accountability. I tend to think that we've given a lot of information to communities, but we have left out the executive, the assembly, or the private sector. And also I'm sure the report shares that CSOs do not really engage, is it the communities from the moment we the projects or something of the sort, but government and other private sectors do. So I don't know how that came up. Maybe at the time we will come to find out on that, because most of the time I believe when we are writing our donors a proposal, or one thing we always use, we build up on other programs that we have used in other projects. That makes us develop a project on social accountability in a particular area. All the same, just let me not take a lot of time, but I do agree with the report, and those questions arising, especially on the tools and processes that need much power relationship influencing. It's good to target now that we are heading to election period. These ones who get into position, let's start with them at the very beginning. So that by the end of 5 years, we are working with them along, not that they see us as always attacking them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Thank you for that. I'd like to invite Abraham Rugo to kindly give us his reactions. Thank you. Abraham?
So thank you so much. Something has happened with my camera. I can't tell what, but I hope it revives at some point. So thank you so much, Wanjiro, and my apology. Somebody had just called me when you were asking me to speak. I've listened very carefully, and I also did have a look at the report, and I also have participated in the initial conversations. One of the things that first, I mean, I broadly agree with the work and the findings, I think my concerns and my feedback would be to strengthen some of those points. And the first one is just to ask in whose interest is social accountability's success. Is it in the interest of the citizens? Is it in the interest of the government actors? Is it in the interest of those who are responsible for providing accountability, whether you think, oversight and accountability, whether you think about the elected representatives and other actors? So I think that is a critical, because I think it's time to locate social accountability and to rethink. And I like the idea about having a philosophical foundation, having a very clear focus, particularly in the people who drive social accountability. That is the citizens. Joanne may want to mute. The citizens who drive this. What is their interest in doing social accountability? Because as you rightly say, it has become more focused on the tools. It's become more focused on the projects that are funded for the different engagements, and not necessarily a movement, not necessarily a cause that has an interested party to it. And some of this has a historical foundation. As you remember, and you've been here right from the very beginning, I think in around 04, 05, when a lot of social accountability work in Kenya started, particularly with the CDF social audit. It was really, to assess how projects, how specific activities, how specific brick and mortar projects were being done. And it seemingly never crossed. In some instances it has, but it seemingly never crossed to be a citizen-driven agenda. It still remains at a project, a CSO, organizational-driven kind of agenda. And the question to ask is: do citizens actually, in and of themselves, actually come up and undertake a social accountability process of whatever form, without the financial support of an organization, of an institution, by taking these to be their own costs? We have seen that happen in a number of situations, but it's still far-fetched, and yet that should be the case, because as part of our democratic and civic duty, holding our leaders and those who provide services, I think is good. So for me, the first point is really to emphasize that there is need for this report and the recommendations to take the issue of interest, in whose interest this is happening, a bit more seriously. The other question to ask, beyond saying there is no political will, and beyond saying that government officials are not necessarily interested, is in what way can the interest of government officials, for instance, and other actors, holding constant, those who may basically be wanting, to mess things up. To what extent can we locate social accountability within the interests of the broader political activity? Within agendas of political parties, within manifestos, for instance, and political programming, within long-term development planning, so that then it becomes an integral part, and not seen as this something that is being done from the outside and being brought to us. So those were my 2 points that I really wanted to speak about: the question of interest and how that can be connected to both the interests of the citizens, but also the interests of the government officials, and then the point around moving it from tools and and project programming, as it were, to critical governance processes that citizens do engage in it. Perhaps something that I did not see so much coming out is how much of government actors who are engaged in the conversation to answer the question why, when they do appreciate these processes and these outcomes and findings, why they take them sometimes seriously, why they don't take them seriously, And I think that can be strengthened. Now, we know very well also that there's been a couple of processes in which social accountability findings can find their way into policy processes. For instance, the Auditor General has been doing a process of the citizen audit accountability citizen audit accountability framework, the CAA, for instance, conversations around how some of these things can end up in committees of parliament, so that then there is a usability that is beyond just publishing and making noise, which is okay, but then it can find its way into policy conversation. So that will be my feedback. I think this is critical. The recommendations on the next actions, particularly of convenings to ask what is working, what is not working, why is it not working, is it time to reboot, to rethink, to rework some of the initial historical foundations of social accountability, particularly in Kenya, that may actually be informing why things are happening the way they are happening. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it. I work at the International Budget Partnership, Kenya, and keen to continue engaging in this space. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Abraham. I can see 2 hands up. I can see John Kamande and Titus Gitonga. So John, please take the floor, and then Titus follow through him. Our job here is to hear you. The few questions that come up we'll respond to, but really it's your feedback that we want. Asante. John, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shiro, and congratulations and for the job well done. Listening through the presentation, I could feel rejuvenated, because from time to time, we need to sit down and reflect how effective our strategies are towards achieving the main intent of social accountability work. So my name is John Kamande. I am the Civic Education Officer at Uraia Trust. And my quick reflection is on 2 fronts. One of them, of course, the findings was the issue of lack of access to information. And of course, looking at it from a policy angle, how can we as actors in the space think of developing and supporting legislative and policy guidelines? Yeah. One of the things that, of course, came out in terms of the gaps in the supply side was the lack of political will, and even civic education. Civic education laws are very limited. I don't know how many counties have civic education. How can we, in the work of social accountability, root for development of legislative and policy documents so that we can anchor our social accountability work? I think that's one strategy that I would be really excited to hear, because when we have these laws in place, I think we'll be sure that some of the concerns on enforcement, some of the concerns on political goodwill can actually be addressed. Secondly, I think the issue about enforcement, and it's really something that over the years we've seen a lot of gaps. I don't know, what is the place of the independent offices and commissions? For instance, when we see there is malpractice in a certain department, probably a county, yeah, how effective are these independent offices? For example, the EACC, even the Office of the Control of Budget and the Auditor General, they have raised serious concerns, but we have not seen uptake in terms of this. So my quick reflection will be just to look at how can we be able also to program around supporting these independent commissions and offices to be able to better deliver on their mandate and support some of the emerging findings from, of course, social accountability work. So that's my quick reflection. And thank you everyone for really a very, very informative session. I'm looking forward to see how well we can move on beyond now, of course, some of the recommendations that are coming from this report. Thanks.
Thank you very much, John. Of course, John is with Uraia, who are supporting this project. So it's great to hear you, especially given the broad scope of Uraia's work. And yes, indeed, we continue to move together. I had seen Chris Getonga's hand up. I don't see it now. So I see Crispin. Wonderful. Crispin, please take the floor. Crispin, I have looked for you severally on other occasions and not been able to find you. Oh, I apologize. It was Titus Gitonga who had his hand up. So let us hear Titus, and Crispin can speak after that. Crispin, of course, is the consultant who worked on the CAA on the auditor on the Auditor General framework. So it will be very good to hear from you. Titus, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Wanjiru and colleagues from TISA. My name is Titus Gitonga. I work with Transparency International Kenya. And again, I also appreciate this discussion is really dear to all our hearts when we're dealing with citizen accountability work. And so my reflections on some of the findings of the report is that they are clearly illustrative of the many issues that we have been facing when doing social accountability work. But when it comes to the theory underpinning social accountability work, the report makes reference to a lot of social justice aspects, but maybe just to add on that would be the social contract theory, which for me, when you define social accountability as government's adherence to the social contract, we go back to the social contract theory. And therefore, our social contract within Kenya, of course, is the Constitution, which has very elaborate provisions that, of course, support social accountability being embedded in all aspects of our everyday lives. And in this essence, I would go back to what then John Commander was saying about the legislative framework. How have we ensured that the legislative framework is responsive to the constitutional dream? Because you see, a lot of the provisions that have been embedded in our constitution are put at the center of all public engagement, citizen engagement. And therefore, I think there's a feeling, when you look at, I was even in a meeting yesterday for Marsabit County as well, coming up with their public participation bill. And there is a feel of ticking the box. People are not being innovative in the way we are looking at public participation, where we are looking at only participation in numbers and not like consultations of the public. Yeah? And for instance, even for us, as we are doing when we are structuring our social accountability work as CSOs, what is our kind of stakeholder mapping and the framework that we're using? In essence, if I would give an example of, for instance, our engagements in the health sector, we have social accountability frameworks embedded within the legislation framework. So when we talk about the health facility management committees that are supposed to represent citizens in governance of health facilities, how effective are they in terms of that representation and ensuring that citizens' voices can be heard? And do we also require that they have parallel reporting structures to what the public officials are reporting, so that there is that aspect of citizens' involvement in running of institutions and even ownership of those institutions? And even in targeting, have we, much as we came up with the social contract, there are some who are within that space of active citizenship, and others have moved out of that space. For instance, if we look at what we call the middle class, when, for instance, things in the education sector are not going well, there are privatized solutions that then citizens go to and leave the public institutions to be run in a way that is not responsive to the citizens' needs. And that's the private sector aspects of social aspects of what government is supposed to provide are more prominent than the government side of or the public side of it. So I think we really need to interact a bit with why are we not seeing more citizens, organized groups, professional bodies, and the likes being more involved in social accountability work, as much as we are also looking at those who have been targeted traditionally by this kind of work. And I think on public participation, then there needs a lot of work to be done in ensuring that there is not just participation in numbers, but there is indeed consultation and effective engagement. And like also has been pointed out, what is the role of the oversight institutions in ensuring that citizens' voices are heard and that they can be seen within the government's response mechanisms that are put in place for service delivery. So yeah, maybe I'll continue making my contribution as the discussions go on. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Titus. And yeah, just another very provoking, bringing up so many issues. Like I said, this is your session. If there are any clear questions, we will answer them. Otherwise, our job is to listen. And your feedback is helping us identify, the framing that we need to take for the next phase of this engagement. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to invite Crispin Odwor. I saw that Chris Owala had also raised his hand, then it went down. So, okay, it's up again. So Crispin, please take the floor, and then Chris Owala. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shira. Sorry that I joined the presentation late, and I'm disadvantaged in the sense that I missed the initial presentations. I came in when they actually getting to the recommendations, and I've also not gone through the report. But my comments are just based on what I was able to capture. The presentation was going on, and just to also speak on some of the issues that have been raised or touched on by some members in the plenary. Abraham said something that I find to be very, very interesting when he was asking in whose interest is social accountability. And it's something that I've always been thinking about. When you're talking about development work and some of these social accountability initiatives that are taken by civil society and the citizen, can we really do this without bringing in politics? Because if we say that politics is about the allocation of resources, and in politics, we are talking about stakeholder power, interest, and incentives, looking across the board, all the stakeholders, including Wanjiku. In my thinking then, when you're undertaking social accountability initiatives, I think what you're trying to do by building that critical mass of Wanjiku who are able to engage in these processes and actually demand for accountability, whether it's in the management of resources or the delivery of public services, and even in the formulation of policies, because we know that actually corruption also finds its way or is even planned for earlier, even when you're coming up with policies, for instance. I think when you are building that critical mass of Wanjiku, what you're trying to do actually is that we might not be knowing it, but we are actually engaging in politics. What you're doing is that we are empowering Wanjiku to realize that they have power. And one of the ways they can use that power to bring changes in terms of improved service delivery, of better management of public resources, would be to organize themselves to engage in processes like budget tracking, like social audit, or even participating in budget making and planning for development. So that when they do this, then as an interested stakeholder with that power coming from this critical mass that is informed, they are able to actually sit on that table of allocation of resources without sitting there directly with the other powerful stakeholders who could be the politicians or even the technocrats in government. So in our approach in undertaking social accountability initiatives, then we need to consider the power, the interest, and the incentives of all these stakeholders across the board, so that, for instance, we are building the capacity of county government officers on social accountability, so that they can actually begin appreciating these initiatives and the tools and actually the contribution of the same to enhance the delivery of services or even better performance of government, we are actually speaking to their interests. When engaging the members of the County Assembly and the members of Parliament, then we do it in a manner that then makes them embrace these social accountability initiatives that are being implemented at the community level or whichever other level. So the issue of power, interest, and incentives is very, very important so that the executives see their interest out of these findings of, let's say, a scorecard or even a citizen report card in terms of just enhancing delivery of their services. Something else that I find interesting, and I think somebody touched on it, the issue of the private sector in social accountability work. That would be something that we really need to also push for, because we know that the private sector also implements programs or even they have activities which are supposed to have some impact on either local communities where they're actually undertaking this work, and even the need of the private sector to engage in this process, have an interest in these processes, because after all, they are not operating in a vacuum. So the issue in the slides, when we are saying that we are preoccupied with the tools and processes, and therefore this takes away from the CBOs and the CSOs the ability to actually engage politically. We can still do that from the initial points that I was raising. Through our processes, how do we rope in these other stakeholders through our processes without even engaging with them directly? The issues around legislation and even policies on social accountability, that very good, because you know in India we have states that actually have laws on social audit. I've always been asking myself for the civil society actors or organizations. We have counties that have been progressive around citizen engagement and social accountability, like 20 counties like Elgeyo Marakwet. Are we able then to engage with them so that we can work with them towards even developing some of these laws at the county level that will actually promote social accountability? For the private sector, like players like ISPAC and the likes, the need then for social accounting. We know that the accounts profession actually changes with time, and increasingly worldwide we are realizing that, as I always say, that even though we allocate resources for budget, then we can no longer use the budget as a measure of the quality and quantity. We have to go a step further by trying to examine whether these resources are actually delivering for the targeted beneficiaries. And so when you're talking of social accounting, it's simply the measurement and reporting on internal and external information concerning the impact of an entity on its activity in the society. And what the Office of the Auditor General is doing through citizen accountability audit, this will actually help them in measuring the effectiveness of public programs and even resources through the projects and programs that are being implemented at the community level and then national. Because as raised earlier in the discussions, concern has been around uptake of recommendations out of social audits and social accountability initiatives done by maybe civil society organizations, and even the recommendations coming out of reports by the Office of the Auditor General. In the discussions around citizen accountability audit, one thing that's coming out is that picking lessons from what the civil society have been doing, especially around follow-up, working together with citizens, we are seeing a situation whereby through citizen accountability audit and through that engagement with civil society organizations and citizens in the process, then there's likely to be increased uptake of these recommendations, given the fact that for the civil society, they can very easily follow up with other powerful stakeholders, for instance, like the members of the County Assembly and members of Parliament. And the citizens also can take up the issue arising out of the citizen accountability audit with different stakeholders. So what you get there is actually the power interplay. Why is it that when the citizen and civil society push the members of the County Assembly or members of Parliament to respond to issues out of social audit in national government, CBF, or any other resources, why is it that there's always uptake of recommendations? So are we able then to apply that through citizen accountability and accountability? So basically that's what I have for now, but once I read the report, I know I'll be able to give more input on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Crispin. That was extremely rich. You've actually served as a discussant, and of course, we benefited from the in-depth work you did, while at IEA and also in the CAA. So excellent. And it also points out some of the stakeholders that we should have ensured we get onto the call, but who we will follow up with, especially private sector look and actors like ISPAC. So thank you very much. I'd also now, I'd like to invite Chris Owala and then Fred Odinga to please take the floor. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Wanjiru, and thanks to Tim. I think I also came late, but nevertheless, I'll have a contribution to make. I think this report is timely, and I wanted to pick it from two angles. One is the process, and what we need to do as CSOs also moving forward. I think many a times when we do social accountability, we don't go deeper the way we are supposed to go. We in a way we are in a way not in a position to build movement, and we at times get into a process of looking at it as a project. But I tend to think that for us to make social accountability meaningful, we need first to build movement around the communities and help connect the social accountability to their pain, so that they can see that if we organize, if we participate, if we make the government accountable, then our pain will disappear. So the aspect of connecting the dots, whereby we connect the dots from the pain we undergo in service delivery and social accountability, and look at social accountability as a medicine that can be able to cure our pain. I think that's what needs to be our major focus. Then we're looking at how do we build a movement of citizens that can be able to be responsive and engage the government from time to time. And again, I think also there's we have tried some element of a governance roundtable in Sierra, whereby you realize that if we get issues which are evidence-based and end up into a process where you are in the table with duty bearers like a governor, then those issues tend to get solutions. And again, that comes back to, again, social accountability works well where there's political goodwill. And I think that needs to be one thing that we also need to strengthen as civil society moving forward. Third is the element of looking at evidence gathering. At times we, as civil society, we don't, not always, but at times we don't get fact and evidence well to enable us engages in the accountability issues. And I think we need to strengthen the documentation and evidence gathering. And again, looking at the relationship that we have had with how the government perceives us as civil society, at times looking at us that we are confronting. But I think for social accountability to work well, we need to have a productive mechanism of engagement for us to get result. I think looking at the terrain that where we are come from and where we need to go to, at times, social accountability that we do is donor-driven or particular NGO-driven. And they are not the issues that community, what you can call community felt needs, that they can feel that they can easily rally around and even participate and even contribute to their solution. So I think this is something that I feel that we need to strengthen. Then I agree with my friend, Dr. Abraham Rugo, that yes, there's a need to strengthen and Kitonga BTI to strengthen independent oversight institution, but we also need to look at why are they not delivering? Is it because of political will? Is it because of resources? Because at times you might end up focusing on an area that might not be the problem. So I think if you ask me, Ciro and the group, is that we need, as civil society, we need to move the needle. Many a times we go do 1 year project, run away, and we think we have made community to be in the front line in social accountability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Owala. Like all the others, that is excellent. We had hoped we had invited COG to get an overview of how the county roundtables are going. You've mentioned that. It's one of the issues we'll definitely follow up alongside the many points of engagement that are coming out. This is extremely helpful to us. Thank you to you all. Frederick, please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wanjiru. I just want to also add my voice. This is really great, and I'm quite happy that social accountability is actually gaining traction within our space, and learning around social accountability are being organized. I think this research is great, and even the discussions that are going on. And I wanted to make reference to what Abraham did mention, and also Chris, and Chris around the partnership, and Awala around the process of social accountability. What I want to acknowledge is that at times social accountability is context specific, and these reports speak to some of the processes that need to happen, which is around developing a common understanding around the concept. Then it's looking at also the capacity building process of the community, and then there is the element of the legislative framework for it now to work effectively. In appreciation of this, I think one critical thing is that these take time, and I just wanted to find a reflection, if that was discussed with the participant, around some of the projects that are being funded around social accountability. Chris did mention that some of the projects are a bit a 1 year project. And I'm asking myself if 1 year is really sufficient to be able to really drive the change that we want to see. You want to build a momentum so that we also shift this focus from social accountability being a donor-driven process or a civil society driven process into a citizen-driven process. But what we need to acknowledge is that the community really need to buy in this and own it, and these take time. But I think at times, as Joanne was also mentioning in the chat, the time is quite short to allow to do this, and that is why at times we tend to do ticking of the boxes to have gone through the processes, but we've not really quite prepared the community sufficiently. So I think that is something that we also need to have a discussion maybe with the funders whom we are partnering with, to really reflect on what will be an appropriate time frame to allow for the preparing of the community around social accountability. And then the other area that is also of keen interest and it's gaining attraction is around the social media space. and its effectiveness in terms of driving accountability. I think this was seen during the COVID-19 when physical engagement were also very limited, and there is need to really grow this knowledge, grow the tools that we need to use through these spaces, and see to it that we are exploring all opportunities that will really drive the change that we want to see. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Fred. And I can see we have several contributions in the chat. I'm going to request Eric to please assist me to just read out what's in the chat. I will then also ask, without pressure, a couple of the participants on this call if they'd like to give us their reflections. One is Dr. Alex Awiti, who was a lead researcher on the very pivotal youth study published in 2016, Youth and Corruption. And that study focused on the culture of corruption. And Dr. Alex Awiti, we would love to hear from you, but like I said, no pressure. If you're able, after Eric has taken us through the chats, would be keen to hear your top line reflections. We also have on the call Tom Were, the ED of ACT, who we are aware that ACT are presently designing and will be implementing the FCDO program on county, I believe it's on county governance. Again, we'd be very keen to hear your reflections. And like I said, no pressure, this is an open forum. So you know, feel free. So Eric, please take us through the chat's contributions. Then Dr. Were, Dr. Awiti and Tom, please let us hear from you. And I can see the hand of Kawive Wambua, who we know is this author, an architect of, is actually an architect, as well as an author of the famous Makueni County social public participation framework. So he's both a practitioner. As an author, he's also a strong theoretician and continues to do political engagement. So Kawibe, will hear from you after we've done all this. We are very honored to have such an illustrious attendance all round. So Eric, please take us through the chat, and then we have a small window for those two speakers, then we'll hear from Kawibe. Thank you.
Right, thanks Wanjiru. I think I'll quickly read through some of the feedback coming in. First is from Cornelius Odur, who says he can't speak at the moment, but makes a point that social accountability assumes political goodwill from the government, and due to changing government or official interest over the implementation period, this assumption is usually untenable and thus leads to poor social accountability results. I think that's a comment from Cornelius Odur. We also have one from Maureen Odori, who says, thank you, TISA team. The report is indeed insightful and captures the realities of social accountability initiatives. The questions arising from the reflections on the report are indeed pertinent and of great interest, particularly item 3, which seeks to focus most social accountability, which speaks to focus of most social accountability interventions being on tools and processes as opposed to building capacities of CSOs and CBOs to understand the power dynamics and engage politically. This resonates to our experience implementing a citizens inclusion in governance program, where the intention is to focus on tools and processes, but realized the gap was in political engagement. which when addressed unlocked the existent bottlenecks and facilitated active participation on the typically excluded group in governance processes. So Maureen Odwori is from the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, and has indicated apologies, and I think she needs to be in another call. There's also a comment from Con Osendo from FCDO, who says, good work, Tisa, and I need a timely conversation, and I hope we can strengthen these lessons before the next election so that we can renew the relationships with duty bearers wiser, better equipped, and with stronger partnerships. He indicates that he has to drop off for another call, and we'll send more feedback directly to the team. We also have feedback from Sylvia Katua, who says, hello all, this is Sylvia from Zalendo Trust. Congratulations to Tisa. This is a great study with powerful findings. I agree with Joanne that there is need to have a framework which monitors results post-projects, not just the usual M&D, but rather an innovative way to harness the outcomes and clearly define the impact. While this may be difficult, especially in our line of work, there are new emerging methods that we can leverage on. It is equally necessary to understand the kind of impact that power and politics has on social accountability. In order to, and to counter this, there needs to be focus on institutions as opposed to persons and positions that would help, this would help assist in our work. I think we also had a follow-up comment from Joan Otengo, who says one challenge on social accountability is a projected programs. That is, projects on social accountability are short-term and may not give room for following up on the changes gained. I think this had someone touched on this previously. There's a comment from Dr. Mshai Mwangola who says, I missed most part of the report, so don't want to speak, but got the last part and the discussion. Thank you for this report and this opportunity. We have been thinking a lot about the question of impact vis-a-vis the interventions of social accountability at Raia Trust, and indeed the Trust's current strategic framework are focusing on this. So this is very, very useful in affirming the direction we are taking, and I'm so grateful for the concrete recommendations. Looking forward to engaging further on this, both from the perspective of Raia as well as mine as a citizen, as the citizens being discussed as the actors you are reaching out to. And I think two other comments is one from Titus Gitonga, who says holding power to account is key. Are citizens, questions like, are citizens able to effectively hold power to account through their elected representatives or directly as envisaged by our constitution? How can citizens effectively engage through their elected representatives and directly? I think recommendations there by developing policies, laws, strategies, tools that would help respond to the above for social accountability to be effective. And there's, I think, a last comment from Dr. Rugo, who says, one point I wanted to add is perhaps the report would help us reflect on social accountability of services that is recurrent and not just the projects which are brick and mortar type. I think those are the reflections coming in from the chat. Over to you, Wanjiru.
Thank you very much, Eric. I'd like to once again invite Dr. Awiti to kindly address the meeting with his reflections. Dr. Awiti.
Thank you very much, Wanjiru. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for leading a great effort to produce the report that brings us to this discussion, which is important. I think I just have one reflection, and that's about, mechanisms for broader citizen engagement in the accountability question or in the quest or journey of accountability. And I'm wondering whether there's an opportunity to engage with media as critical stakeholders in this process, to the extent that media is a channel for public conversations, but also is a voice that would in many instances provide a sense of what citizens feel. Because I think, there can be no social accountability without citizen agency or citizen advocacy. What we're suggesting is that it's not always prudent that other people speak on behalf of citizens who basically are supposed to carry the burden or reap of the fruits of governance, because they are the electors. And there's only such a thing as government being as good as the people who elect government. So I'm wondering whether, and I'm just thinking because I lead a university that has a media program, and one of the opportunities I think would then be, how can this body of individuals gathered here today participate in conversations that provide some capacity for media to be more acutely aware of bringing these accountability questions in their reporting. We're going into an election season, and there's going to be all kinds of stuff put out there, and media often just allows the politicians to make whatever statement they want to make without holding them accountable, or even channeling back to what they had said previously. So I think my sense would be, if this group is interested, would be to engage at some point in a discussion that helps to support journalists, especially during this season of election reporting, that there is more due diligence and there is more effort to support a more vibrant press that generates critical public discourse, but not just because it's what the politicians think, but also what the citizens would want the politicians to channel. So it's really around citizen voices. It's around broader and more detailed models to imagine citizen engagement. It doesn't have to be necessarily journalism in the way that we understand it, but what about other channels of responsible use and engagement in through social media? So it's really media writ large, but easily you could see how we can work with journalists who are known quantities in this discussion. The bloggers are another side of the house that we probably need to engage. But I think as a critical effort in joining broader public participation in supporting accountability measures, I think we need to think about how ourselves in this forum work with media and other citizens who have a big horn and listen to more than some of us gathered here. So those will be my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Awiti, and very, very insightful. And of course, we welcome that invitation to engage, and we will definitely reflect internally, and I expect you'll be hearing from us pretty soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I'd like to invite Tom Were to give us his reflections, if he's still on the call. I can see he's not responsive. Like I said, no pressure. It's an open invitation. But we also have Kawive. Kawive, we're not hearing from Tom, so kindly take the floor, and I very much welcome your insights from from both sides of the aisle, from the government side. Of course, you worked with a very progressive government. You've also worked in civic education at a time when it was maybe, I don't know whether it was easier or more difficult to do civic education, and now you're on more of the political education side. So Kawive, we welcome you, and please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Wanjiru, for the kind invitation and introduction. First and foremost, I think this is a very comprehensive report. It has very useful findings, that can help the civil society and other actors, government partners, in terms of designing and implementing social accountability going forward. The most interesting aspect of the report for me is the fact that it talks about the various actors. It talks about the CSOs, it talks about donor partners, development partners, talks about government, legislators, etc. I think it would benefit this research and this report, although I have not been able to look at the design questions of the report, just to find out. So what are the perspectives or design, not design, but implementation perspectives of citizens who are not necessarily themselves organized as CBOs, who are not organized, who are not working with government? Is there a perspective of what citizens do on their own in terms of social accountability? And I'm coming from two points of reference. Number one being that where I'm working now, in Oka, Kenya, we have a program called Sauti Yetu. In this program, we try as much as possible to build capacity of citizens and let them organize and plan and develop their own instruments and methods of doing social accountability. And we support, but by and large, we do not, as an organization, participate in the actual work of the communities, except to support. And it has got very interesting results, including the fact that when citizens are organized in these groups, they call themselves citizen action groups. They are able to convene meetings and to invite their representatives, mostly MCS, sometimes MPs, to give account of projects that they have been supporting. It's a very interesting framework. Of course, we can't say it's purely citizens because we involved in building their capacity and all that, but there's that sense of ownership. So that would be a perspective that would be interesting to look at. And Sauti Yetu as a program, when it is implemented, it takes multiple exposures to the community over a period, or over a continuous period of time, not necessarily tied to maybe a program cycle, 1 year or 2 years. But for instance, in some of the communities, we've been working for more than 5 years, and there has been progressive advancement of the engagement processes. So that is one. And then number two is looking at the perspectives from Makwen, and my experience in Makwen was how citizens also formed groups or formed action platforms around regions, for example, either it's villages or wards, but they form fluid groups that are related to program implementations or projects that are being implemented. And of course, there was support from government in terms of forming project implementation committees, but which committees were elected or selected by citizens on their own, and this they have a life of, they exist for their life. The life of the committees is the life of the project, and when there are new projects being done, new committees, strictly not the same members are selected to join the process of program implementation. So I think for me, the challenge is how do we politicize accountability in the sense of making citizens themselves form caucuses, form groups, form committees that work with the implementers of the project, whether they are government contractors, whether they are contractors that have been given the work, or communities that have been given the work by development partners, etc. And politicizing in terms of determination of quality and ownership. Those two. How is the quality? How does, like, the issue of the BQ, which was a very big question for us in Makueni, is how does a BQ become a public document? Not a technical engineers and technical contractors document, which is discussed between the contractor and the person contracting, but which becomes a document that community uses as a reference point for appraising the performance of the work, for the accountability. Ignore the fact that it is a technical document, but the act of sharing it, the act of giving it to a community, a group of men and women who do not understand what those technical terms are, is in itself a political milestone. And these people are also able to get their children, the volunteers, people who are able to come to the communities and say, this is what the BQ means in this particular perspective, in the language they understand, and in the way that they are supposed to understand it. So I think the use in social accountability of education and or technical capacity against community members is one of the lessons that we need to carry into the future, and say that it can be done away with. That kind of restriction can be done away with. That social accountability need not be intellectual. It need not be technical. It is a question of quality and usability and ownership. Those three are what my contributions would be to this process. But I think this is a very good reflection. And like I said at the beginning of my discussion, the aspect of communities themselves, not CSOs, not development partners, not government, but communities becoming an item, an actor, so to speak, or an originator, specifically an originator of social accountability processes, is a critical one that we need to review and see how does it work, because it sits at the bottom or at the foundation of sustainability. So if, for example, Inuka is not working with the communities in Madare, will community members interact with projects, interact with the contractors, interact with the quality and the prescribed bills of quantities for projects on their own, because they are the users and they are the beneficiaries of the project that's being implemented. I think those are critical considerations. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kawive. And as you can see by our time, we have only a few minutes left on this conversation. So I believe, Kawive, it's so fitting that you are giving us what I believe is the final submission into this. And thank you for those insights and provoking us to also address some of the aspects that haven't come out in the report. Just before I will hand over to Eric to wind us up, I'll say if there's any pressing issue, please raise your hand. Like I say, we're out of time, so I'm hoping we've exhausted everything. if there's any pressing issue, there'll be, you have a minute to just give your reflection. But I will also respond to maybe two questions that came out and do so quite quickly. Abraham Rugo asked us if we heard from government during the data collection process, and that is well spotted. We didn't get comprehensive feedback from interviews with government. During the COVID period, that arm of government was largely non-responsive. We had a few of the Chapter 15 institutions, but no, our next step has to have those comprehensive conversations with government. Nonetheless, we felt because we were looking at programming, we felt, yes, it was entirely valid for us to hear the civil society, the development partner perspective, and a few intergovernmental institutions. So yes, that's a gap. And then Titus raised a question on, are we open to looking at different philosophical approaches? And the answer is definitely. That's why we are doing this. So thank you for your generosity in sharing your knowledge, sharing your time. And before Titus, I invite Eric to close, I'd like to invite Joseph to please address us. And thank you so much once again, and Karibu, Joseph.
Thank you very much, Wanjiro, and thanks to everyone that has participated in this validation workshop. I mean, we are very excited as Denmark because all the views that have been provided today will definitely enrich this very, very good report. So we are very grateful for all of you sparing time and for using your knowledge and experience to enhance this. But I also want to recognize the presence of two members of the Uraia Board of Trustees. That is the chair, Dr. Mshai, and Kawive. So we really appreciate as Denmark the great interest that even Uraia at the highest level has for this one. And to reiterate our pride at our partnership with Uraia and TISA in this. So thank you very much, Wanjiro. Good job. And we expect to work with you to now give life to the findings of this particular report. Because at the end of the day, what's important is implementing the recommendations. And we have a very strong commitment in doing so. And I also know that a number of the counterparts in other missions are similarly interested in furthering this course of social accountability. So thank you very much. Asante sana.
Thank you so much, Joseph. And without any ado, Eric, please help us wind up our program for today. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Wanjiro, and thanks, Joseph, for that. I see Dr. Mshai has responded on the chat and says they're privileged to be part of this and grateful for the opportunity to engage in this process. Thank you so much to you, Daktari, and indeed to all of us who created time for this. There are a couple of provocative questions that have emerged in this session as various speakers shared on this issue. And I think a lot of these issues are for us as an implementing team to think and reflect on. And just a commitment from our end that we'll be reaching out to you in the coming days to just follow up on some of the insights and that have emerged and that you've raised, but also to look forward to partnership on some of the key activities that will be rolling out at county levels and particularly in the areas that many of you work in, and we hope to strengthen that. We hope to to strengthen that arm of this kind of partnership. I think maybe just to as I bring this to a close, is just to mention that we are looking at putting together a working group that will help provide the needed continued thinking around this process and the conceptual clarity that will need us throughout this project. I think, as it was mentioned at the onset, is that this is more of it's a very learning process, and we hope to see a lot of these learnings. I think there are a couple of things that have emerged. The need for us to strategically engage the media from Dr. Awiti, I think, and many other things. So we hope to be able to get a wealth of guidance and knowledge from this team, and I think we'll be reaching out to some of us on this call to help us formulate and get going this particular aspect of this work. There are a couple of other things that are scheduled across the next couple of weeks and months, which include community conversations and various county level dialogues that we'll be holding in key target counties. I think just to mention a few, will be looking to go into Makueni, Kiambu, Vihiga, and Mombasa counties, but also open to other collaborations that would emerge in various other sectors that we haven't mentioned. Yeah, so I think we look forward to a lot of partnership and continued engagement around this. So I think this forms, I think, a way forward. We'll be sharing the report with those of us. If you haven't, for one reason or another, able to get the report, we'll be able to send that report. And I think a few of us have also requested for the presentation. We'll also be availing that to us after this meeting. So thank you so much and have a good day. Unless anyone has any other business, we can bring this to a close. All right, asante sana. I think we can adjourn the meeting, and thanks for creating time to be here. Yeah, and I think we can finish at this point. Asante and have a good day. Bye.